Hello, Nathaniel.
Hello, we're back.
So we're back. We're back. It's fun to be back. And I'm excited to have a conversation about the research that you've recently carried out. And I know very little about it, so it's going to be of great interest to me. And we thought we could just chat around it and see what comes up. But I'd love for you to share what the research was and why you carried it out. And I know that it will be of value. So tell us about it.
Yeah, let's see where we go. Are we streaming in the group now, by the way, or are we just recording?
Just recording.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I started doing some research, specifically talking to women about what men need. And I'm still doing it. So I've been doing it for the last 2-3 weeks, maybe. And it's been super interesting. And it came up really because I think, like we talked about last time, I run men's groups similar to you, and I run retreats for men. And the next one that I'm doing in September, I'm collaborating with someone to do it, and this guy's going to host it in his house. He's got a beautiful house in the woods, and his partner runs quite a big network for women in advertising and marketing and stuff like that. Something like 6,000 women in this group. And one of the things that we were talking about was, okay, when we're ready to launch, we could talk to that group as a way to, fill the event. And it just sort of dawned on us in this conversation of like, well, if we're going to talk to women about this, we should probably find out what women actually even think. And it sounds kind of obvious, doesn't it? But I'm in my 3rd year of running men's groups now. And whenever I've come to fill the groups, I've only ever talked to men about it. I thought, okay, it's a men's group. I want men in the group. I'm just going to talk to men, what the men need, what the men want, etc. And never sort of intentionally talk to women about it. And obviously it's come up just in life when women in my world have asked me what I'm up to, and I've said I'm running a men's group or whatever. And the feedback has always been really positive from women. There's been this sort of like, oh, thank God someone's doing something kind of energy. It's always been really positive, always, and it's always been really supportive, and there's always been a lot of curiosity. But I never sort of specifically sought out women's opinions about it until 3 weeks ago, when we decided, right, we'd like to talk to this network of women. I'm not sure how to talk to this network of women because I only ever talk in the language of men. And so that's really where it started. So I'm going to put a massive disclaimer on this right up front, right? Because I used to work in the research industry for 11 years. I was in the corporate research world, not this type of research, but I know a little bit about research. And I know for a fact this is not sound, well-structured research, right? This is not, demographically representative and stratified samples and all that kind of stuff. So I'm putting that out there right up front because I know that, in the world of how to do research, this is not that. This is me reaching out to my network basically and saying, hey, I'd love to talk to some women about this. It's actually a validation for anyone who knows sort of validation from the startup kind of world, like validating a business idea. That's more of what it is. So I've been talking to a few women, and there's been some big themes come up, I guess. So I don't know, how do you want to do this? Should I just start talking about some of the stuff that's come up? Have you got specific questions maybe?
I haven't got specific questions. I'm very much open to just us chatting. And so what are these themes?
Yeah. Well, I guess before I get into that, actually, one of the things I was just thinking about it before, like what's my big picture kind of realizations from this. And I think one of them is that there's a huge appetite for this conversation from women. Like, that was really, I just put a post on Facebook and said, hey, I'd love to talk to some women about a project that I'm doing that's got something, I'm not even sure if I mentioned in the post it was anything to do with men. Yeah, I did. I said, I've got something going on in the world of men. Would any women be up for sharing your views? And I had a really good response. I had loads of people I haven't talked to for years, put their hand up to talk. So that's one thing that I think really stuck out to me, is like, there's this, that women want to talk about this stuff. Women see the value of this, of men doing some work on themselves and understanding themselves better. So that was a big thing that came out for me. I mean, that's even how we've met, you know, because I talked to someone that a mutual friend of ours, and they put us in touch, and that's happening now too, even more as I go into this. I'm now talking to people that I've never even met or heard of, because I talked to a woman, asked her perspective and said, is there anyone else who you know who might be open to talking about this? And they've gone, yeah, this lady, this lady, this lady. And so, you know, there's a real appetite here for this conversation, which in itself, for me, was really interesting.
It feels very timely, doesn't it? It feels to me that we're at a point of I feel like there are many problems, but it's also, it feels like a crucial time to now address these problems. I feel like people are more open to addressing these problems and to somehow restore some kind of balance to our world, because I think we're all craving this balance. It's what we need, and it's only by addressing the problems on both sides. And as you've said, we do talk a different language in many ways, and it's great to just be able to listen and understand each other better in order to evolve, in order for us to reclaim our own power, and also to come together and rise together for a more powerful future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing that on a macro scale with all of the conversation about toxic masculinity and that kind of thing. There's obviously the trend, or the emergence of the feminist movement, and, you know, the conversation about equality in the workplace, and various other conversations. There's some big stuff going on here for sure. I think what's really interesting for me in all of this is that there's this sense that's so clear from women that men are a bit lost, which it was a bit confronting to hear that, but it was also, it resonated with me, because I feel that. I totally feel that. I mean, I've been really actively exploring this in my own life in the last probably 2 years, off the back of coming out of a series of long-term relationships with women, you know, back-to-back long-term relationships, not being happy for a very long time, but trying really hard to fit into some kind of role, or some kind of, I don't know, so some kind of criteria maybe of what life should be like, and really struggling with it and not feeling it, and it being probably blindingly obvious for everybody else to see, but not for me to see. And so I went through a breakup a couple of years ago, that off my own back. You know, I split up with the girl, so I wasn't really happy, and I was really, that happened 3 times in a row over a span of 15 years, really. Longer than that, actually, really, since I was about 20, 21. And I kind of had a word with myself, because I broke her heart, I broke my heart. She's my best mate, and I was just like, what am I doing? What is going on here? Why have I done that again? Because it's a pattern, once it happened, once is once, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a clear pattern here in my way of relating with women. And it's like, right, I don't want to be that guy. So I really started to look at this a couple of years ago and really sought to understand the dynamic and how I was thinking about it. And so when I've started to do this research and talk to some women, it's like everyone's seeing it. Every single woman that I've spoken to has said something along the lines of, there's some problems here that need to be resolved, that men are lost, that the dynamic between men and women is not where they want it to be or where it could be. And so I think there's some really big stuff happening here that I'm
fabulous,
scraping the surface of, I feel. But
so should we start looking into what came up for you?
Yeah, let's do it. I guess the other thing in here, the other thing about these is that probably none of this will be like completely new news.
Yeah.
Like, I think we all know, really.
We might all know it, but we're not necessarily talking about it. And I think this is where we're starting to make change, by talking about it, by being open, honest. At the end of the day, that's what we all need, isn't it? We all need to be honest, authentic, and then we can start to break this stuff down and move forward, move beyond the problems.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's a good place to start. I mean, one of the things that came through quite clearly is that we as men, we tend to not be very honest with ourselves, with how we feel and what we think. And that kind of creates more problems, because we're not. Someone put it as, we don't know how to be ourselves, which really hit me. It's like we don't know. We struggle to express ourselves, and we often struggle to know ourselves, know what we want and what we stand for, know what's okay and what's not, to have boundaries. And women see that so clearly.
And it's very hard to explain how we feel and what we want and what we need when we don't know ourselves. It's impossible to have healthy relationships if we don't know ourselves. If we put all of our attention on the other person. And I think possibly this has happened partly because of the rise of, obviously, feminism and uprising, which was necessary. But it also doesn't help anyone for men to not rise. So what we don't want is women to rise and men to weaken. That just doesn't help anyone.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that, again, that came really strongly through the conversations that I've been having, in that women want the men in their world, and that might be their partner. People were also talking about their brothers. I had some women who were talking about their sons as well. Women want their men to feel that they can stand up for themselves and express themselves fully. Like, women really want that from us, and we're so bad at that. And I know from me, I mean, so much of my challenges in romantic relationships have been from my inability to express myself, to just either try and completely deny what I was feeling and just pretend it wasn't happening and put a mask on and fake it, or from just not having the the language and just being like, I don't know how to have this conversation, and feeling so kind of overwhelmed by that, and stuck, really. So it was so clear from talking to these women that it seems like you want us to be strong.
Absolutely. We need and want.
Yeah, you need it. It was like, I had one lady say to me, when we have a fight, I don't want him to back down.
No.
I don't want him to give up what he thinks. I don't want him to just acquiesce to me and to just do what he thinks I want.
No.
Because he doesn't want to have a conflict. Like, I don't want that. I don't mind a fight. That doesn't detract from our relationship. It's good that he has opinions. It's good that he has opinions and stands up for those opinions and is prepared to kind of to have that kind of level of dialogue.
Definitely.
And I know for me, like, there's many times where I've not done that.
You know what's coming up as well? Women can be incredibly manipulative. And I don't want to be able to manipulate a man.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I want a man to be strong enough that he will not be manipulated.
Yeah.
Because we've been taught as women to we've been taught how to manipulate. And that's the dark side. That's not us in our loving power. And for a man to be people pleasing or pleasing his woman and weakening himself is not in his loving power. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It really goes back to this book. I read this book a couple of months ago called No More Mr. Nice Guy, which apparently it's been around. I think it's 15 years old or something. It's a bit of a classic apparently, but I only came across it recently, and it's quite a sort of provocative title, but it is about nice guy syndrome, basically, that men of the last last two generations, even possibly three, have grown up in this world where we think that the right thing to do is to be nice all the time, and that by being nice it means giving in, not going for what we want, particularly with women. This is and that really actually gets in the way. It's actually unfulfilling for women to have a man who's being like that, who thinks like that, and who thinks that that's actually doing the right thing for her. Like, that's the bit where it kind of goes wrong. For men, it's coming from a place of, well, if I'm nice and she's not angry or upset or whatever, then that's a good thing. When actually, for a lot of women, for most of the women that I spoke to, that's not the best thing, because it's us as men giving up our power, in your words. Like, it's giving up our often what our desires and wants and needs, and even sometimes deeper stuff like our values, like not being who we want to be in the world, not following the path that we want because it might upset people or something.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pressure, I think, for men to kind of carry out this duty of being provider, or and that can work, obviously, with dynamics. Different relationships work differently, but what I want to see, and I think I said this in our last conversation, is that I want to see men who are lit up by their purpose, and who are standing in their own power, doing their own thing. And and as women, we don't want our men to be another child. We don't want to be looking after or telling a man what to do. That's what we do for our children. We don't want that. So it's hugely confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Something that came up from someone, And I'll just caveat this as well, like, obviously because of what I do and what you do and the networks that I've got, like a lot of the women that I talk to are quite heavily into personal development, and a lot of them professionally doing something in that space. So the kind of, a lot of the language around this comes from that kind of place. But one of the ladies I spoke to talked about she said it's not the man's responsibility to manage my emotions. No. Like, that's not up to him. And man, that hit me so hard, because I just thought, wow, how many times in my life have I made a decision, said something, not said something, whatever, because of what the effect might have been with the girl that I was with. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I realized just how dangerous that idea is, actually. If you think if as a man you think it's your responsibility to manage what other people feel, which is impossible, you can't ever control that, because it's a completely inside job, then we end up tying ourselves in knots, because we're trying to do the right thing to not upset or anger or frustrate someone, but it's not in our control anyway. And we start operating in a way that's not in line with actually what we want or what we think or what we believe. And that's really dangerous. And women feel that. Women really feel that. Like there was so much coming through of like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. They want us to stand strong.
Yeah, and another word I would use there is I don't want to be fixed. I don't want to be rescued or fixed.
Yeah.
So if I I do a lot of work with women, and one of the things that we need to reclaim as women is our body and our connection to nature and our cycle and our rhythm, and that is ever changing. And for a woman to know herself is to know her body, to know her cycle, to know how she responds and links with nature. And for me, it's to be able to communicate that. So, for example, I might say, I've got nothing in me today. I'm absolutely exhausted. I just need to be heard. That's all. That's all it is. I'm communicating how I'm feeling, and just want to be okay. I get that. Go do what you need to do. But the minute a man tries to then start fixing, or what's wrong, or something is lost. So I think for women, we need to be reclaiming who we are, but also communicating that. That's knowing ourselves. And men need to be reclaiming who they are and communicating that. And then we can start to have deeper, more mature, conscious conversations around our wants and needs. Because I mean, I don't want to make this a topic about women, because it's not. It's about our relationship with men, and so that's what came up as you were talking then. I don't have any desire to be fixed or rescued by a man. In fact, or by anyone. That idea makes me feel, like that. I hate it. I'm responsible for me. But a loving thing that I can do is say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is where I'm at. This is what I want. This is what I need. And sharing that. And I think a lot of men have been taught that a good man rescues. It's this knight in shining armor. This poor woman needs rescuing, and that's his role, and that's his place to rescue and fix.
Yeah.
And when you're rescuing and fixing, you're only going to attract one type of woman, and that's a very needy, wounded, unhealthy relationship.
Yeah, it kind of comes to the point of like, what is masculinity? That was something that came through really strongly, of like this idea that we have, which is cultural, right? It's a modern Western kind of idea that we're talking about here. Is a huge part of the problem. Women were using language like being limited by what society's expectations, that kind of thing, that men are sort of pigeonholed as having to be strong, having to be the hero. That kind of, you just look at any Disney story, it's like who's the main male character is always some kind of hero guy who comes in and saves the day, and he's like some kind of savior, and it's that idea means that men are trying to live up to that, even if they don't feel it, even if they don't really know how to do that, and therefore trying to fix women, trying to fix other men.
Yeah,
I know what you need, that kind of solution focused. Oh yeah, the obvious answer is this, rather than just talking and sharing and listening, like you said. And it means very often we're faking it. We're wearing these masks that is not necessarily who we feel we are. It's like we're trying to be something, rather than just being who we are. And I think that's something that's really come through strongly here, is like the taboos and stigma around masculinity, that we've got to know it all, that we've got to be able to work everything out, that we shouldn't ask for help, that we should never admit weakness. Like one woman described it as the idea of a man in the modern world, in our modern world, is that we're not allowed to feel anything. It's like we're just supposed to be strong. I think that's where a lot of the fixing kind of mentality comes from. Like I should have the answers, because I'm a man. Of course I should. And what? And I think what you said before is just as applicable to men as it is to women, to be honest, in terms of that's sometimes just needing to be heard. Like men are not really heard, especially not with other men. No way. I ran the men's circle a couple of weeks ago, not last weekend, the weekend before. And a huge part of the rules around that kind of, how we're going to do this, because when everyone got there, everyone's shit scared, to be honest, because apart from one guy, none of them had done anything like that before, and so everyone was like, ooh, really cagey at the start. And I sort of set the boundaries of like, look, we're not here to solve each other's problems. Like, we're not here, because you can get that if you go to the pub with your mates and you say, I'm struggling with my relationship, you're going to get a load of solutions straight away. Or do this, don't do this, or kick her out, or you need to sort yourself out, or whatever. Like, we've got that in spades, but that's not really what we need. We need to be heard too, just like women need to be heard. Sometimes it's okay to just go, you know what, just need to get this off my chest, without everyone jumping in and being like, what are the answers? And it's such a powerful thing. And I had to like explicitly say that at the start, because I know what happens when you put a bunch of men together. It's like everyone was going, yeah, can I share what I see here? Can I tell you what you need to do? That kind of energy. And one of the guys, he was talking, and I just let him run for about an hour and a half without anyone contributing, whatever, and he just kept talking and talking and talking, sharing about it. He had a major midlife crisis, cheated on his wife with his best mate's wife. This huge drama in the last, well, about a year ago. Both families torn to shreds. You know, really, he's had a really just came off track big time, and he just needed to talk about it, and he did, without any intervention from me, without any intervention from anyone else, and he just talked and talked and talked, and he came to his own conclusions. Like he resolved it through having whatever it was, 90 minutes to just go. It was a beautiful thing to witness. And I was kind of, you know, as a coach, sort of, there were loads of opportunities where I could have jumped in, and I had to check myself to be like, no, just give him space, because he needs space. He's not had any space. He's 55. The guy's never had any space to actually have this conversation with himself even. And as he verbalized it and he, you know, put it out and heard himself speaking and started to get feedback off his own dialogue, he came to his own conclusions, and that's all he needed. And it was massive for him. He was so relieved after it. And I think we need that. You know, we need that in the world of men, just like we need it in the world of women. And you definitely do not get that with groups of men. You just don't.
So what can we do? What can we do to normalize openness and the breaking down of these old stories that we're holding on to? Because I really feel that we've been so focused on feeling that we need to become something or be more this or be more that. And actually, I feel that we just need to reclaim parts of us that we've rejected. I feel that we all, men and women, need to reclaim our wholeness.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily come from asking other people. You know, as you've said, that wisdom was already within that guy. He already knew deep down what he needed to do, but he needed that space to process and to hear himself speak. So what can we do? Is it conversations like this that we're having now that just normalize, that open that up for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing it. I think that's what this is. I see that. I see what we're doing right now as a contribution to helping to change this dynamic. We need to make it okay for men to talk about what's going on. Like last time we spoke, I talked in some depth about my battle with anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, 10 years ago, there's no way I would have done that, because I was embarrassed about it and I was ashamed, and I thought that I was weird, and that I was, you know, that was something not to be talked about because it was admitting some kind of weakness. But I see now that the most powerful thing any of us can do really is demonstrate that it's okay, you know, that rather than say it's okay, to prove it, show it. It goes back to the Gandhi quote of be the change that you want to see in the world. You know, I really truly believe that that's the most powerful thing that any of us can do. Like when I ran that retreat a couple of weeks ago, I had to go there first. I had to lay myself out bare, you know, and just be like, boom, this is it, and not be the facilitator or the coach or anything. It wasn't any of that. It was like, no, we're just a bunch of guys in a room. There's no rules. We can talk about anything. Let's go, you know. But I had to go there first. I had to show that I could do that. So, you know, like me opening up today about my terrible relationship history, like, you know, that it's important that we talk about that. I think it's really important that men see that it's okay to admit weakness, to admit to having emotions, you know, like we all know that everyone's having emotions. We all know that men have it just as much as women. So why is it weird for men to talk about it? Oh, because that makes you a pussy. Like, you know, that's a really old-fashioned, out-of-date kind of thinking, and it serves no purpose for the perspective of growth.
Yeah.
For the perspective of personal growth. Like, I know when I was talking to someone about the next men's group that I've got going, it was such an interesting conversation. I wasn't enrolling, it wasn't like an enrollment conversation, it was a research validation, just getting his perspective. And this guy was mid-50s, I think, you know, done really well in his life, all that kind of stuff, family, career, etc. But in a bit of a funk, not really where he wanted to be. I think his last business venture didn't go very well. It kind of dented his confidence a bit. And right at the start of the conversation, he said, this is weird, like me just talking about this stuff, like this feels weird. Like, I don't, you know, he said the idea of being in a group and talking about what I feel, it's just horrific to me. Like, it's just, you know, no, don't want to be there. And then he proceeded to then talk for about an hour about how he was feeling, which was really interesting because he needed it. Like, once he got going, warmth, he just let rip. And he talked about being anxious, he talked about having self-loathing, he talked about all this stuff. But then when it came to the idea of like, well, would you come and sit in a group of people and actually talk about that stuff? He was like, no way. He said, I was doing it in this country place in the woods, and he said, I would just be outside chopping wood for 4 days. He was like, give me the axe. I don't care if it's raining. I'm just going to go and chop wood. That's all I'm going to do. And it'll probably be really helpful. But sitting in a group talking about it, no way. And it's really interesting because I'm actually now we've talked about it. I'm talking to him again on Friday, and now his views changed a bit because I think he realised that actually it's not so scary. So I think that's one thing that we can do is like create spaces, whether it's like this or whether it's one-to-one or whatever, but create spaces where it's okay for men to just be real, like just be real, just be honest with themselves and with someone else about what's going on. That's not a show of weakness.
No.
In fact, I wrote a couple of quotes down here because this just really jumped out at me because I think men need to hear this. One woman said to me, being vulnerable is strong and it's hot.
I agree.
Said it's an attractive quality in a man. I
agree.
I don't think we see it like that. We see it as weak. We see it as like, or we see it as it's a mark of weakness, and therefore women won't like it. So I've got to have my game face on and, you know, be Mr. Cool. And actually, it's not. It's attractive. Which that's new news for me. I've got to be honest. In the last probably year or so, I've started to realise that.
Yeah, because it's showing your truth, isn't it? Vulnerability is basically saying, I'm trusting you with this in the same way that, and it works both ways. You know, it doesn't mean that you're walking around, you know, crying your eyes out for hours, but it's about being real and saying, this scares me, or I've made this mistake, or I don't know what to do about this. You therefore open yourself up to growth, to something, to potential, don't you, for something to happen. Whereas if we're walking around pretending everything's okay, there's nowhere for anything to go. Yeah, I find vulnerability is probably the ultimate strength. definitely.
Yeah, we need to hear that.
Yeah.
We really need to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't see that voice is not loud enough in our world at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think.
Well, I definitely back that. Definitely back that quote personally.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is strength for sure. And I've
Yeah.
said it to lots of men before. Don't be scared to be vulnerable, because it is your strength. It is what is going to move you forward. It's what's going to allow you to evolve.
Yeah.
Vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Someone else said, there's nothing more attractive than a man who knows himself.
Definitely.
And she followed that up with, even if he's not my cup of tea. Like, I might not be physically attracted to him, but it's attractive that he knows himself.
Yeah, I agree. And whether that's, it could be a working relationship, it could be a friendship, it could be partners or whatever. But if someone knows themselves, that is attractive. I've got a handful of male friends that I'll meet for coffee or have conversations with, and they know themselves. So we can have really rich conversation. There's no pretense. We can actually talk about what's real, because they know themselves. I know myself. And the same for my close girlfriends. They deeply know themselves. So there's no surface stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just because I think because it's easy to assume that people understand what that actually means, but like, how do you think of that when you say, like, I know myself, or when I see a man who knows himself? Like, what do you actually mean by that? What is that for you?
So for me, it's a deep acceptance of myself. I know what I need. I know how my body works. I know what my body needs. I know how my mind works. I know what I want. Yeah, that's what it means. I've done the work on myself, so I feel that I can look myself in the mirror. I can, from metaphorically and physically, and accept every aspect of myself. I feel like I'm not afraid of any aspect of myself, but I accept all of it. So there's no part of me that I won't go to, that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I feel that, having this conversation with friends the other day, that the men that I'm friends with have overcome. They have many of them through breakdowns, or they've had some kind of crisis where their ego has been smashed, and they've come to a deeper realization of themselves. So many of my friends have been or are recovering addicts or alcoholics, or or have been through some kind of deep trauma that has made them look at the world differently and rejected the cultural, societal stories. And the same for my girlfriends. We've moved beyond this people pleasing, being all things to all people. We've come back to, why are we here? What do we need? What can we give truly? How can we make a difference in the world? Yeah, does that answer?
Yeah.
Question, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an acceptance. It's I had a great friend here yesterday, and we were talking about the shadow self. I mean, I don't really use that term particularly, because I feel that there are parts of ourselves that we've rejected because we feel that they're wrong. We've been taught that they're wrong, and so we push them away or push them down. But reclaiming those parts of ourselves enables us to evolve and to make a difference in the world, to move into our purpose. And yeah. I think there's a lot of ourselves that we reject and we need to reclaim. And for me, that's knowing and accepting who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for men, a lot of it is, like you were saying, it's not safe to be emotional or vulnerable, or I feel a big problem is that there haven't been a huge amount of healthy male role models who have been able to teach men what it means to be a healthy masculine man, to be a healthy masculine father. And I think a lot of the time we're just muddling through, and that's a lot of confusion is caused by the lack of role modeling. I mean, a couple of guys that I've interviewed, one guy around addiction, beneath the addiction was, I don't know what my feelings are. I can't even identify what they are. I just know that I either feel good or I feel shit. I don't know what they are. I don't know if I feel guilty or frustrated or or I'm either angry or feel great. I don't know, can't identify what these emotions are. That was one man. And another guy that I interviewed around homosexuality and the shame, the consequence of the shame that he carried. He never had a role model of what it was. So he's a 62-year-old Irish, grew up in a Catholic Irish family. It was like the ultimate the ultimate challenge for him. But no one had ever role modeled what it was like for a man to love another man and be in a healthy relationship with another man. So he went from shame from his family, because it was so frightening for them, to then going into a culture, the gay scene in London, which was reckless and wasn't healthy either, because there were no role models. And as a result, he slept with thousands of men but never had a loving relationship with a man, because he didn't know what it was. I think we need to be shown. We need elders, don't we? We need to be modeled.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. I think, again, coming back to sort of some of the research that I was doing, I spoke to some men about this kind of stuff as well, and so women and men, and prompted, just put the question out, like, what do you think of when you think of groups of men getting together? And you could, like most people could probably guess the answers to that. Most people think it's a stag do. And most people said that, stag do, or it's down the pub, often with sport involved. But that's like the only context that we seem to have in our culture for men getting together with other men, for example. Like you said, there's very, very little out there that is in the public sort of domain that most people know about. That's a space for that to happen. And both of those have, you know, connotations and things that are involved, which for a lot of men, certainly for a lot of women, it's just completely off-putting. But even for a lot of men, it's like not interested. I talked to one guy a couple of weeks ago who's in his 50s, and he said he's avoided every single stag do he's ever been invited to. He's never been to one. He's been invited to loads in his life. He's like, I just can't handle it. He's like, I hate that environment because it's competitive and it's full of ego, and it's everyone's trying to better each other, and everyone's trying to tell a better story or crack a better joke or do something more daring than the other person or whatever. And he said, I hate it. He said, I don't feel safe. And I think it goes back to the role models thing. It's not just about individuals, but it's about the context as well of like, what, until we kind of normalize the fact that men can get together with a bunch of other men and just communicate without anything else, then it's weird.
Yeah.
And we don't know, no one wants to do it, no one knows how to handle it or how to even think about it. It's like, what? That sounds odd.
But the fact that it is deemed weird in itself is weird, isn't it? I mean, it sounds it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that men don't feel comfortable being with other men and not feeling in competition or this one-upmanship or I've got to be the alpha, so I've got to make that bloke feel shit or take the piss out of him. And there is huge competition within men and huge competition within women, this cattiness. And if we can just know ourselves and accept ourselves, that's where the power lies, I believe. Then we none of us are in competition. There is no competition because we're all unique. We can't compare. We have to start somewhere.
It's funny, I could even feel it this weekend just gone. I just had two massive weekends. 2 weekends ago I ran this retreat, and then last weekend just gone I spent 5 days in the woods doing exactly the opposite, burning stuff, cooking stuff on the fire, and building things, which, you know, is the opposite. It's kind of the other sort of stereotypical men thing that people think about. And it was really interesting. We were building this tree house for my friend's wedding, which is in a month, and one of my best mates is a professional treehouse builder, and he's been doing it all himself with the help of some of the other of us, and we're running out of time because the wedding's coming up. So he'd organised some of his crew for the company that he works for, who build tree houses, like these massive adventure playgrounds, and they came down and they finished it. And so you had 6 guys, professional carpenters, builders, treehouse builders, just clambering all over this tree. They had all the power tools. There were some of them literally hanging off like 10 meters up, screwing stuff in, and it was amazing to watch. But I went, my role in that little group is like I'm the chef. Like, I cook for them because it's a big job, and if not, they're just eating pot noodles. Whereas I like cooking, so I do all the cooking for them. So I went and did the cooking there. And there was this kind of this joke throughout the whole of the days of like, well, I'm doing the women's job, like I'm in the kitchen kind of thing, ha ha ha, you know, we're the real men screwing stuff in. And I could feel that. Like it was a joke and it was funny and I was totally playing up to it. But I could also feel it. I could feel like there was a competitiveness. I could see these guys doing these man things and being like, I can't do that. I go to the top of that tree and I was absolutely terrified. I hated it out there. But I could feel that energy, that sort of competitiveness and whatever. And I could totally feel that through the weekend. And I was very aware of it, having spent a few days the weekend before being out of that ego space, being out of that competitiveness, being deliberately pushing that to one side and just connecting as humans. And it was so funny. And I was like, I could just feel it. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is exactly what we're talking about. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't getting in the way. It wasn't a problem. I could laugh at it and I was aware of it and I could see it. And it was kind of what you said. I know myself well enough that I could witness that happening in me and kind of be curious about it and chuckle about it even, and make light of it and make a joke out of it. And most of them were making a joke about the fact that they couldn't cook, and if they were there for 5 days on their own, they'd probably have starved. And there was this sort of competitive joke about it. But I mean, that's it. That's exactly it right there. There's this, the moment you put a bunch of guys together, there's this, oh, right, I've got to puff my chest out and, you know, be the big man in some way.
Yeah.
And that just gets in the way of connection very often. It just gets in the way of real, genuine, deep connection. And I know for a fact from the guys who were in the group the other week, that's so lacking for men. Men really feel that. They just feel disconnected. I definitely felt that inability to communicate in a way that is deep and meaningful without that being weird. It's like we kind of crave it and we need it because we're humans, but it's like it's not allowed. And that competitiveness and that sort of that idea of masculinity that many of us have got gets in the way of that. And it stops us being able to really connect with each other. And that's true of men to other men. It's true of men to women. It's true of men, even in family dynamics. You know, even within close-knit families, men often feel disconnected. I had a guy who's, from the outside, you'd say he had the perfect family life. Long-term relationship. I think they've been married more than 10 years. I think they've been together for ages, 15 years or something like that. 2 kids. He's got a good job. Kids are doing well. You know, you look on the outside. I see he's someone I know, and I see him as someone who is kind of the perfect example of getting it right. You know, the family kind of dynamic. And when he opened up, he said he just felt totally disconnected. He said he didn't feel he was ticking all the boxes, but he felt like he was living someone else's life. That's what he said. And that he didn't feel able to have that conversation, even with his wife. They went to school together, like they've known each other a very, very long time. I think he's 38 maybe, so they've known each other for 20 years or whatever. But he did not feel able to have that conversation with her because he was worried about what that might do to their relationship and what she might think and all of that. And he was in this, what some people would consider to be a paradise of a life, and he just felt totally disconnected. And it comes from that inability to communicate and to articulate and to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, what you were saying about we all crave that level of depth in order to connect, but it's we do have to move beyond this fear around rejection, and in order to be authentic, don't we? In order to be honest. Otherwise, we can only connect at a surface level, which is just, yeah, kind of pointless, really. Certainly not fulfilling.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that came through from this conversations with some of these women, even women who've been in who still are in long-term marriages, relationships, happy, but saying there's a lack of depth. And they want that. You want that, I think we do too. We just don't know how to do it.
No. I think it's probably easier for women because women talk more openly, generally, and it's not unusual for groups of women to gather. I mean, when I look at my my work for the last 12 years, I've gathered groups and they have just mainly been women. So when I've run retreats, I've had maybe one guy join, but most of my groups have become women's circles unintentionally. They just have, because women are open to that and they love sharing. And when you put the call out, women, does anyone want to help me? Women will be like, yes, please. I want to help. I want to contribute. I love the fact that you're asking me. Women love to share and communicate. So it's not alien for us, but for men, it's just, it really needs to change. And so the more conversations we can have like this, the better. Sure.
Yeah, hopefully us doing this and doing it publicly demonstrates something. Shows that it's okay, and that well, here's a question actually for people to think about. I think just check in with yourself now. If you've watched all of this, like, do you feel more or less connected to us as a result of listening to us have this conversation? And that's the indicator of it. I had a guy open up in a virtual group that I was running, which just finished a couple of weeks ago, like a coaching group, and he opened up about abuse in his relationship and how he said he had this girl in his life for about 3 months, and at the start of it he couldn't shut up about it. He said, this girl's just amazing. She's everything. This is it. I've never had a relationship like this before, and blah, 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 blah. He was so loved up. And then a couple of months into it, he came on and he was almost crying, and he said it turned really abusive, and she was threatening to make false accusations to the police. It was like a threat against him. If you don't do this, then I'm going to go to the police and say you've done that. And he was absolutely terrified. And it was a really deep conversation. And I shared some stories because I've got a friend who's had a similar situation. I've got a couple of clients, male clients, who today actually has just been told that the accusation made against him has been dropped because there's no evidence for it. And I shared about that, and we had this really open, deep, raw conversation. And everyone else in the group, men and women, were just like, the level of connection just went so much deeper because we talked about some really heavy stuff, and it was real, and it was quite uncomfortable. I got really upset at one point because of what happened to my friend, and he was really upset. And he just had that threat made to him the night before, and that open, vulnerable conversation just totally changed the dynamic in the room. It was a virtual room, but totally changed it. Everyone was just so much more connected, and that was okay. It was helpful. It was helpful for all of us. It was helpful for me. It was helpful for him, and it helped everybody else in the group. And from not shying away from the big stuff and just being real and going, I'm not okay. I don't know what to do, and I need help. And I don't know. He said, I've never been in this situation before. I do not know how to handle this. On the one hand, he's got this most amazing, beautiful woman who's electric sex and all this kind of stuff. And on the other hand, she's just said something to him that's totally shocked him to his core. And he was in uncharted territory and he didn't know what to do. And good on him. He put his hand up and said, can we talk about this? Not what I was expecting to talk about that day, but it's amazing how that openness allowed for a deeper connection. And I think that's such a powerful thing. And hopefully that us doing this shows that it's okay.
Yeah. So you you just saying that there, I also have a male friend who is currently going through a divorce following a very similar situation. So you sharing that there's a friend of yours, a friend of mine, clients of yours, that in itself may show somebody else that they're not alone. It's only when we speak up and say, this has happened to me, because when we're living in our heads, when we're keeping it all inside, we really truly believe that we're the only one that is going through that, and that we are odd and we're weird and weak or whatever, but it's not that uncommon.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just as true with that situation as it is with any particular emotion that people feel.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that stops men talking about where they're at and sharing where they're at, whether that's with other men or not, is the idea that it's not safe to do that. It's kind of weird. I think back to our previous conversation. I think back to my, whatever it was, 11 years in the corporate world, 9 of which were spent in a semi-panic, because of my anxiety and social anxiety and public speaking and stuff. And it must have been so obvious to other people, but for me, I just could not possibly ever admit to it. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I kept getting volunteered for stuff because I was good at my job and good at presenting and stuff. So I kept saying yes, even though I really didn't want to do it. And I had some shock horror, like real just panic moments. And it would have been so different if right at the start of that I'd said, I'm really struggling with standing up and talking to people. Can someone help me? Because someone would have probably helped me. And then probably a bunch of other people would have gone, yeah, me too. And this is how I deal with it. And I never did, not once, because I thought I couldn't and I shouldn't. And then once I got to a certain level in the organization, it was like a definite no-no because I'm important now, apparently. And it was like, couldn't possibly do that because then it was a risk to my role or my perception of who I was in the company and all that rubbish. But if I'd just gone, I'm nervous in front of people, can someone help me? I bet someone would have helped me. And I probably would have had 8 years of enjoying it rather than 8 years of being absolutely terrified and dreading the moment someone asked me to speak. But no, didn't, because it felt like I was weird. And actually having spent a lot of time figuring that out and, doing the work on myself, I know that that's pretty much the most common fear out there in the world. It's like most people feel like that. But no one's talking, in that organization anyway, no one's talking about it. It's like, wow. But I think all can be resolved through conversation.
Definitely. So how can we summarize this? How can we round up this conversation?
It's a good question. I don't know. I feel like this is going the opposite way for me. I feel like I'm like opening this can of worms, and I really do. I feel like I'm scratching the surface on a much bigger thing. I didn't when I started doing this or seeking input from women. It was really about how do I communicate something that I'm already doing and I already know about? How do I communicate it to women? That's what it was really about. You know, got an opportunity to talk to this network of women. How do I do that more effectively? That's where I was coming from. I did not think all of a sudden I was going to be in this conversation in the way that I feel I am now. So I'm not sure how to summarize this. I mean, I feel like this is massive and it's getting bigger. And but I guess my if I had to somehow bring this in, I think what's really clear to me is that we as men need to know ourselves more, look inside, and put ourselves in situations where we can do that. And where this relates to the research about women is that the women in our world see that. It's blindingly obvious to them. And they are fully supportive of us. They want us to understand ourselves better. And they think it's hot. It's a good thing. Like it's not about fixing broken men. It's about, I love your language of kind of stepping into your power, of like reconnecting to your power. Like it's about just being true to ourselves and being strong men in the world who and the strength coming from knowing ourselves and being able to accept all parts of us, like you said before. And there's so many positive benefits from that, not least being better with the women in your life. But that's one of many. So that's where my head is at the moment. I'm not sure that's a concise summary. It's risking running off in many directions, but that's where my head's at with this conversation. How about you?
Yeah, similar really. I feel I could just talk for hours, but I think what I want to say really is that the most powerful men that I know or that I witness in the world are powerful from their hearts, in a masculine way. So to put that on a really base level, they've connected their balls to their hearts. And I feel that's what we need. We need men in their loving power as a force for good, not a force for destruction, not a force for competition, but as a force for good. We want that, we need it. And I feel that it's not disrespectful to a woman for a man to rise up into his potential, into his power. I feel that may be a bit of a problem, that men want equality. The vast majority of men want equality and don't want to disrespect women. So they don't want to say the wrong thing. But actually, I feel that if women can focus on knowing ourselves, and men, if you can focus on knowing yourselves and what you want and what you need and what you're great at, and both rise in that as openly and authentically and honestly as we can, then I feel that the world is just going to be a better place. Yeah, I don't know how, like you, I don't really know how to summarize it, but they're the points I think that are coming up the most strongly. Is that we all want men to be in their power. No one, I certainly don't want to be treading on a man or weakening a man. I just don't want it. And if we can, I think another important word that's come up is safe, is for us to feel safe. Women definitely need to feel safe to open up And men also need to feel safe to open up. And our language is different, but we still probably have the same fundamental needs. Yeah. Mm.
Cool.
Yeah. I've enjoyed this. I think it's been, we've covered so much, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting talking about this because I don't feel I feel like I'm kind of at the start of my journey, really learning more about this. Whereas, like when we talked last time about anxiety, I talk about that all day because I've spent a long time trying to figure it out, and I know it. I've done a lot of learning and a lot of work on myself, and whereas this for me feels new. This feels like something that's emerging, and it feels something that I guess I've been deliberately looking at it in the context of my own life for the last couple of years, maybe. But it feels I'm not sitting here as some kind of expert, Whereas like I was talking about anxiety, I feel like, I know about it pretty well. But whereas this, I don't. I feel like, wow, there's so much to discover here. There's so much depth and richness in this whole topic. But it feels important. It feels important, and it feels like it's really needed. And everyone who I talk to about it seems to agree with that. So I'm glad that we're doing it, and we're kind of just exploring and having a space where we can just unpack some of this stuff. So thanks for creating this kind of conversation where we can do this.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your findings, because also that takes vulnerability and courage, doesn't it, for us to sit here and say we're not experts, we're coaches, we've done work on ourselves and we're sharing what we know, but I feel that I know a woman's journey pretty well, but with the men's group that I created in January, it's very new to me. It's knowing, I kind of know what's needed, but how to deliver that is something that feel like I'm kind of swimming through mud. But something's telling me to keep going, and I know it's needed. So yeah, I'm just really open to these conversations, and hopefully we can all get a bit more clarity around what to do about it.
Yeah.
Which I think is exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's no doubt that this kind of thing is super needed in the world right now. And I think, like you said before, but I think before we hit record, some of the feedback that you've been getting off these kind of conversations is showing that it's helping. So let's keep doing it.
Keep going. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Nathaniel.
Thank you.
The next one, whenever that may be.
Cool.
Take care.